you think
when we
about
talk,
that?
I mean, when we talk about Iran and the reasons that they're going into this war, the reasons have been there for decades, my whole life, you know, my whole entire life, Iran, I always wondered why are they beating up on all these other countries but not Iran? And Iran really doesn't have, I mean, they've got a lot of military, but they don't have a lot of high tech. They do for what they are. They have more high tech than you would expect from their system. But they've been avoided by all the major powers, and you have to ask yourself why. And I've always said, and it's hard to say it out loud, but if your leaders are treating you inhumanely, maybe they're not human,
Well,
right? So maybe your leaders are not human; they're ETs that are running it, and we're seeing kind of it come to a head. It seemed like it wasn't if it was when they did Iraq. They had wars all over Jordan. All everywhere around Iran. There's been war, and Iran has been something with fairly a mediocre air force and mediocre missile technology, very rudimentary, just oodles of it. And then now we're seeing this action right now play out. And what else did they do? What else? I'm also watching what I think is a major trigger for disclosure, for alien disclosure. I think a major trigger for disclosure is going to be the moon missions. And they were going to go to the moon, and then war broke out with Iran, and now they've scrapped it. No, this is wonderful. I just wanted to make sure. So
yeah, we are
this is
recording.
good. This is a
Yes.
great conversation already.
Yeah.
I always said that World War One was about money, and World War Two was about interstellar flight. That's my account from what I went on. So I was taken and was ended up I was taken and went through many black programs here on Earth, and I found a lot of evidence that's supporting it. So I'm not just being kooky, And then there were Germans in space. There was a Deutsch culture in space on a colony that was theirs on Ceres, and everything you said totally lines up to the things that I remember as well. So the United States ETs, local ETs, and ETs from all over the place are working in conjunction. They have several moon bases. They had one that was pretty new in 1980, was just being opened, and they're abducting people and using them with the exotic technology for labor. And like you said, hybrids, that's hybridization. The human genome is very, very pliable to all, we can fit in all the environments, and our genome is pliable. So a lot of ETs, I think, are engineered to live in microgravity or zero gravity. And so they need humans to go and do things. And we're very efficient. We're more efficient than robots, than the bot. And so yeah, everything you just said makes perfect sense. I don't see any red flags in what you mentioned at all. And here's NASA. And here's NASA with $9 billion. I don't know the number. It's a big number. NASA ready to go. At the last minute, they pulled the plug. Said, "No, we're not going. The next mission's not going to go and land on the moon. We're just going to go up and fly around." And the whole Artemis program has completely changed since the war broke out in Iran. And I think there may be on the other end of the political curtain, or our leaders on the other side of what our leaders are doing. There's a connection to things. That things have to be settled before they go to the moon. I think the moon is going to be a trigger for disclosure. Yeah, Miles, and I gotta say, from my perspective, that's all I've got too. I don't really have any kind of big inside information, other than I think that the missions that they had, the timing of everything is, you know, when people are when your government's hiding something from you, when things are hidden, these secret space programs, the what's going on, when they hide things, you can't see what they're doing, obviously, but you can see where the missing hole is. You can see the wake. You can see out of the static there's a hole, and that's what fuels conspiracy theorists. We don't see the facts, but we see the absence of facts that we know should be there. And these are facts. There are things that should be there, and there's a huge absence right now. The whole Iranian thing, and then the scale that it's going on. Like in my personal opinion, for the United States president to come out and say it's going to be a short operation of a few weeks, 6 weeks, doesn't. seem likely to me, as somebody that's kind of followed the situation. Well, I was taken when I was a child. So when I was a child, I went to school with somebody whose father was obviously had access to the programs, and they pointed me out to them. And 2 nights later, I had gray ETs in my room, and I was abducted. And the term has been coined by many other people called the 20 and back. And we're starting to see actual mainstream science admitting that this technology existed. There's a reset button for the genome that you can anti-age, and it's pretty far-fetched, but it's pretty far-fetched sounding, but it is plausible. Yeah. Um, so I was taken. I was 10 years old, and I lived an entire 20 years in these programs, in black programs. So I started at Inyo Kern and then went on to Seattle, then to Peru, then back to Seattle, and then into space. And to the moon, backside of the moon, and then to Mars, and then Ceres. And to answer your question directly, in 2015, they put me back and blanked the memories. I had some kind of memory blanking. And in 2015, I got an MRI scan of my head, and about 10 days later, all the memories came back. And that's how I got into this. Well, as far as the CIA or these space level secret space level security clearance programs are, they had quite a bit of free reign in Peru, quite an infrastructure in Peru already. I was put into a psychoenergetic, the very first place I was after the abduction. ETs took me, did a surgery on me. I did 20 years. The very first place I woke up was in Inyokern, and it was psychoenergetics and remote viewing research. And they shaped us over the course of 9 months to be, they could give us drugs, and I would lose consciousness, and it was psychic service. And then they shipped me off to Peru, and they were running cocaine, flights of cocaine from a place called Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, which is now called Boca, Colorado, to Santa Marta, Colombia. And they would put me on the plane and give me this drug, and I would tell them if the weather was clear, if there were police waiting, whatever it was, they had a psychic in a can. And it only lasted until puberty, for 2 years that I did that, and then I was shipped back. So Peru had quite an infrastructure of these black programs already in place with the locals. The mainstream Peru that we see on TV is along the coast, and that's like a first world country, sort of, along the coastline of Peru. But when you get into the interior, into the forest, the rainforests, it's the riverlands, and people aren't welcome there. It's almost lawless, and that's where they're operating. That's where these programs are operating. So there's probably a lot going on there because they have complete autonomy from the local government.
We talk in ancient structures. I'm talking about pyramids, types of palaces, or in other words,
No, for me, it was not glamorous when I was there. No, it was a river town. It's still there, and no, I wasn't involved in any kind of ancient structures. We did make a side trip to one time, but it didn't pan out. But no, basically, this was an industrial. I was doing a job for an industrial reason. They were running drugs, which a lot of people know, and that it's a fundraiser for these black programs. The drug trade to the United States raises funds to fuel these black programs so that they can operate outside of congressional approval.
and that's MI6 at the same time here in this part of the world.
Yeah, and they're
Uh,
the same. Actually, I believe that they're very affiliated. They're
yeah,
not strangers. They work together hand in hand. It's almost the same exact organization, I'm sure.
yes. And that's where our friends James Casbolt and Max and all those sort of people from this side of the world happen. So let's continue with your travels.
Well, after that, I lost the ability. Whatever they were doing to me, the ability faded late after a few years of it, and they sent me back to Seattle, and I was there. And it was 2000. I want to say that it was 2015 that I got my memories back, and I started going on the record talking about what I remembered. And things checked out. The house, Miles, imagine waking up one day and having memory of living for a few years in a place in America that you don't even know exists. Like a small town that is on the map that just nobody knows about. I'm from a place called Ann Arbor, Michigan. There's Cadillac, Michigan. Imagine if you woke up and you had memories of living in Cadillac, Michigan, which you've never heard of before, and you go look on Google Earth and it's there exactly how you remember. You go, oh my God, that's real. How did that happen? That's kind of what happened to me. I had these memories of this 20 years of living in Seattle and Peru and in Inyokern and then in space. And so I set out to find the places and the house in Seattle, the town in Peru, exactly how I remember it, exactly how I called it out. The place in Inyokern, I went back there in 2023 and filmed a documentary, and the building was there exactly like I described it for many years prior, without ever having been there. And so there's a lot of circumstantial and pretty solid evidence. Also, elements in space, Ceres, the white spots on Ceres, I called out in 2016 that they were salt spots, and NASA thought that they were a cocktail of many different elements. And in 2020, NASA had concluded the Dawn probe went lower orbit, and they concluded that it was briny salt. So I was on record 4 years before NASA. Because I knew, because we flew over it in a ship in the secret space program. We flew over the geyser there on Ceres, and I had those memories prior.
Now explain where Ceres. Oh, continue. I'll just.
Sure, sure, sure. Ceres is a small dwarf planet that's in between Mars and the asteroid belt. It's the largest asteroid, I believe, Ceres and Vespa. Inside it, we're a breakaway civilization of Deutsch culture, European cultures, but basically administered by the Deutsch or Germans. But they identified themselves as Deutsch, and they were very proud of the 30-year war in the 1600s. That was a big part of their history up there. They had battle scenes on their money, and they were ultimately a German culture. And they're inside Ceres. But yeah, it's about 580 miles across. It's a small place. It has microgravity, so they have artificial gravity in there. And inside they have caverns that they've hollowed out and built entire towns, big towns that are very European in structure, European architecture, and they're connected by a train system. So you could get anywhere in the planet within 40 minutes.
I understand that the cars are right-hand drive. Is that true? Something about
They
car
didn't have cars.
or
Everything was train
oh,
connected.
they
So
don't
they
have.
had a few, they had EMS vehicles. So the police, the fire department, the ambulance, they had vehicles. The people could take a train. You were never more than 15 minutes away from a train stop. So wherever you were a short walk to another train stop that would take you to wherever you wanted to go. The entire planet was like that. There were no cars inside for the pedestrians or me, which was a military, um, very low ranking, basically slave labor. Yeah, they had clear phones. They had phones. They had the same addiction to their phones. When I stood on the train, everybody got out their phone. I knew I wasn't allowed to have one because I was labor. So I didn't have my own electric device. I didn't have my own device. But they had clear phones, and what happens is if you stare at screens, your eyes go bad. But if the phone is clear, it doesn't degrade your eyesight. Um,
Yes, these phones, these OLED screens are extremely damaging. Blue light,
yeah.
the
Yes.
very bad,
Yeah.
deliberately.
So they all had clear phones, and
Do you mean a clear?
you could see right through it. It was clear. It was like a glass, and it had its image on it, and it was 3D. There was about an inch of a 3D effect on the image. So there was a light 3D effect on their phones. And they had pads, the same thing. They had like larger iPad ones, the same way. They worked in conjunction. We were trading technology and goods with ET races. I worked on a ship, a trade ship. I know I've jumped a long way up the timeline of the 20 years, but my last 3 or 4 years up there, I was a cargo engineer on a ship. I'd been promoted. I'd worked my way up to that point, and we were doing interstellar trade missions. So it was Star Trek level trading, but with a military kind of a military administration, not civilian. And there's quite a bit going on in our solar system and beyond. The ETs are very connected, and they can get here.
Craft and things. I mean, one of the things which I realized a long time ago was you don't ask the Ministry of Defense about this stuff. You go to the Ministry of the Department of Trade and Industry. They are doing the deals.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the currency up there. So between ET species, I remember that they were trading. The goal was like our mandate was to acquire technology by any means necessary. That was our mission. They wanted to acquire technology. The solar system is made of corporate colonies. Mars Colony Corporation, Ceres Colony Corporation, Luna Colony. I think they're well beyond that. So the thing, the big thing that we're programmed to believe, you watch Star Wars or Star Trek or any kind of show, it's a rocket and it takes forever. Even when they have faster than light travel, it still takes them a long time to get to the next planet. And that's not the case. The ship, they called it bridging. And the ship could bridging, they called it bridging, not portaling or jumping. They called it bridging. We're going to bridge to this system. The systems up there have numbers, and some of them have names, but there's a number system that all the ETs use for in its coordinates and the name of the star as well. We would bridge, it would take us two or three separate bridges to get across the galaxy in almost instantaneously. The ship that I was on, the trade ship that I was on, which was advanced, they had leased it from an ET species. They didn't build it themselves, so they leased it, and then over a period of 6 months or so, they put human systems in it, like water fountains and bathrooms and things that are human into
Yeah,
in the ship. They got basically a chassis. It had three modes of travel. It had A to B flight, which was very fast. I mean very fast. It could go from Ceres to the Earth in a few hours, a
yeah.
couple hours. So 5 or 6 AU an hour worth of flight. So very, very fast.
That's 5 or 6 astronomical units. AU.
Yes. Yes. And it mattered. We were briefed on the orbit of Jupiter, so Ceres when it would come around. And when Ceres would get closer to certain planets, they would schedule missions to go to those planets faster. Um, and then it had a bridging system or jump. According to our sci-fi, they call it jumping,
Well,
where it
a
could
Battlestar
instantaneously.
Galactica seems to be the remake. Seems to be a very gutsy, close sort of thing.
Yes,
Does that does that
yes,
ring true? I really like that series. I mean, the
that
original
is
series was very
exactly
advanced.
what.
That was 1977, the original series.
Yeah. But yeah, the ship could bridge, and the ships were rated by their power output. So a trade ship like ours had a certain power output. A ship that was for war had much higher power output, and it could bridge farther and more faster. So we would bridge to somewhere, and we'd have to wait and recharge and bridge again, and that's how we would get around the
And are
galaxy.
you going through what we would call gates into the bridges?
No, I think it's your standard Einstein-Rosen bridge. It's a wormhole that the ship
Right.
could create. So it's
Okay.
an Einstein-Rosen bridge, and it takes a great deal of power to
Which we
do
would,
so.
in other words, you're dealing Deep Space Nine or something.
Um, I I think, my opinion is I think that academia was severely curtailed around that time, around the end of the 20s. I think a lot they were going into nuclear science, and there was a lot of science that I think got taken off the out of academia, so that nowadays they draw conclusions that no, you can't go into space, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. But back then they had just made these discoveries that got classified. Well, just that more. I think a lot of it is elements, elemental reactions. That in the nuclear science, I think there are elements and processes that they classified, and that's why a lot of things look impossible to us today. Specifically, how elements react with gravity, gravity perturbation. Yes. I think that some of it's viable. I don't think it's the one size fits all. I think some of the properties of it are viable. I don't know a lot about it, but I remember studying it until I saw a few things that I thought, no, it's not quite like that. But I think it's viable. I think some electric universe theory might fit.
Are you Doctor Who? The key to that was the space time thing about having something bigger inside something smaller.
Not so much. No, not in what I went through. No, I can tell you this that Ceres Colony was very advanced in many things, but not as advanced in many things as what I heard from other whistleblowers. So there are other people that are very credible that have been in the space program in other colonies in the solar system, and they describe completely different ships and technology. So it was the ship I was on was kind of Spartan. Um, it looked industrial. The front of it, where the command section was plush and had you know uh, better looking walls and an elevator and carpet and things. But as you got to the rear of the ship, it looked like a factory, almost like a factory in there, with steel floors and pipes and tubes and things. And it was pretty spacious, but it was Spartan.
In other words, it was like a ship, like a
Yes.
sea in the ship, sea.
The first 7 or 8 years up there for the Ceres colony, I was working on, and I don't know, I was doing ship maintenance, so I was down below. I didn't even realize that we were flying, so you couldn't feel it moving. And I was doing ship maintenance for the first few years I was up there, and yeah,
I mean, were you
it
using
was like a
metric
submarine.
metric spanners or bolts or what? Were you looking
Auto
sonic
welders, we
screwdrivers or what?
checked fluids. It was a submarine. It was like a World War II submarine on the inside of it. I think it was a converted, like a catamaran. Like they put a couple submarines together in a catamaran style, and then they had the ability to travel space. And that's what it was
This is
like.
Tompkins stuff. The late, I forget his full name, but he
William
came.
Tompkins, that's
Yeah.
right. And I was on record privately with Dr. Sala before William Tompkins came out publicly. So that was one of the things that got me to the next level of being interviewed was that Dr. Sala, in the months after I got my memories back, asked me, I said, it was a submarine. I believe it was a submarine
In other words, a
because I
submarine
remember
pressure
tripping
hull.
over the doors. Huh? What's
Submarine
that?
pressure hull. Have you heard of a guy called John L. Wolson? John Leonard Wolson.
No.
He's getting pictures of this stuff, and he's got pictures of big structures in space here with his modified camera, focusing the prime focus onto the CCD chip, and he's found ships where they park with a star behind it, but he does close focus, almost like a telescope used as a macro lens. So rather than focusing at infinity and you focus and you just then bingo, you got something up there. Caterpillar tracks on these things like submarines with stuff stuck on the side of them, and then they just
I've
vanish. He's be,
I've never seen any of that
he's
stuff
because
or
there's a
heard of it,
book
but
he's published, Far Above Space Time, Far Above Space Time by John F. Wilkie and John Leonard Wolson. So these are at the optimum refractive ability of what he can see. So it's not clear, but you can bloody well see that's a big son of a bitch up there.
there are large structures out there. So there are many stars have rings around them, and there are corporations up there that build planets and build these large structures. They're throughout the galaxy and other galaxies. I wanted to finish that one statement though. The ship could fly A to B. It had another drive that it could bridge, and there was a third mode that the ship had an engine, and it would use a natural anomaly, and it could go to nearby galaxies. 18 galaxies or so that are nearby ours. They could get to with using a natural phenomenon, like
Like
uh,
coasting on a wave.
well, there are places we don't really talk about them. We haven't discovered them, but there are temporal tears that are out in space,
Yes,
and they could go to one of these, and it was a third motor altogether, and they could use that, and they're very heavily guarded. I would say that there was a huge military presence around it. They had to secure permission to leave the galaxy, and we could access nearby galaxies. So that was a phrase that was started out, and my memory is that they called it zero hour. So the fleet that the Ceres colony was a part of referred to themselves as zero hour, midnight hour, or I forget the German words for it. It's been years since I even
yeah.
talked about this. But once they got the ability to travel time. So in order to, with the ability to jump, it was relative. The distance that the ship could bridge, it also had the same distance in time in the future or past that it could
Yes.
go as well. Like a certain, it could go so far in the past or so far in the future, and it would bridge. And once they got that technology, they named it midnight. Everywhere they go is midnight, zero hour. When we
Right.
show up, it's because they said that they could control time. They were
That
in
you'd
charge
have
of
to
time.
create some kind of a time reference, which would be your zero hour. That would mark your where
Y-
you are, so you can get
Yes,
back.
and that